I'm going to shock all of you, but I had a lovely life. I think as I kept becoming smaller and smaller, my life had fewer and fewer contradictions. So when what you think and what you do are not that dissimilar, there is so much peace.
I'm now going to invite on stage a very, very special person. When we were talking about this connection with our inner selves and with our bodies, we still need a band of people, very often underappreciated band of people, who keep our connection with democracy alive and the connection with the spirit of us as citizens of India alive. Very often we take that for granted, like we take our bodies for granted, but the body politic has to be kept healthy as well. And Aruna Roy has been a soldier of the body politic of India. She has spent 50 years on the ground. She was an IAS officer. That could have been the equivalent of a very privileged and cushioned life. But she chose to throw that up and go to Rajasthan to live a life that would be in true service of the people and even more deeply in true service of the Constitution, to deepen the roots of democracy, to create the right to information, the right to food, the Narega Act, which kept India somewhat safe, the most fragile end of our country, almost 70%. We saw the, one can call them the precariat, the informal workers who we saw on the roads. They were kept safe because of the legislations that Aruna Roy has helped to craft. She's a Magsaysay Award winner, but interestingly, even that recognition is something that she would eschew in the idea of the collective. So it's very, very special to have Aruna Roy here today. She's written a memoir called The Personal is Political, and she has really proved that with an embodiment of her life. She's given her life to what is the political framework of democracy. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Aruna Roy. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming, Aruna. And it's a real privilege to have you here. Aruna, as I was saying, Milind and Usha and Ankita were talking about the spirit connection with connection with the body. You have really kept our connection with the spirit alive, the spirit of freedom and the spirit of constitutionalism. But I wanted to ask you, you've written a book called The Personal is Political, and I want to start with the personal before going into your large public canvas of work. What moved you to give up a job in the IAS and go into the really dusty hinterlands of Rajasthan to a place that was alien to you and to set down roots over there where you have now spent 50 years of your life,
These questions are very difficult, but anyway, let me try. Why did I get into the IAS? First shot. I thought that it would be a service that would let me help me get to the poorest of the poor, reach the villages, the remote villages, and try and do something for the kind of poverty, hunger, and deprivation that we see in India. My husband, Bankar, who also studied with me, but who started an NGO called the Barefoot College, had started working because he had gone to Bihar and he had seen the Bihar famine.
1966.
1965. And it really troubled him. And he was from the Doon School and St. Stephen's, colleges that don't normally send their students to remote villages to work with the poor. I think it was the year that class of 65 in Delhi University that graduated. And our conversations together as well, because we were committed people. He was from very elite institutions. I was from a good institution which taught me my English, as we can see. In India, if you speak English properly, then you definitely come from privilege. So what happens to us that we don't see the underbelly of India, that we don't see people in the streets, people poor, people hungry, and we always think they're an intrusion in our lives. It's just the converse of it, actually. And I think this concern with what is India, and we were also deeply connected to India's independence movement. We were young people when India got partitioned. We were young people when Gandhi was assassinated. For us, this is not part of history. It's part of our lived experience. So you must understand that when we came to all this work, we didn't actually come from textbooks. We didn't come from only our narrowed down lived experiences. It was a larger vision of India that we inherited. It was so the drive to do something for people. But when I realized when I was in the IAS that actually there are too many barriers between us and the people, there are too many transfers and too much corruption. So these three things put together made me feel that the purpose of joining the IAS would not be served. And I left. And I left to go to an NGO. And Aruna Roy had started the Barefoot College at that time, and I went and joined him. I worked with him for 9 years, and then I left again. And I started what is called the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan with Nikhil, who's in the audience, and many other friends. Because it was, to put it very succinctly, I go back again to Gandhiji, and he said there are three kinds of public interface. And he said there is seva, which is service. He said there's nirman, which is development, and sangharsh, which is struggle. And he had all three as part of the Indian independence movement. So if you like, seva was IAS, if you like. It's called the Indian Administrative Service, by the way. It's not called Indian Administration Rulers, It's called Indian Administrative Service. And then I went to Tilonia, where the Barefoot College was located, to build and construct what was called constructive work. How do you develop? How do you develop alternate technology? How do you develop schools? How do you develop all this? But then I found that no matter what you did, ultimately the democratic process beat you. Because whoever got elected to parliament, whoever got elected to the panchayat, whoever was unaccountable and non-transparent, and much of the resources that are yours never reach you. So happened Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, which was formed with 100 peasants and workers, and my living standards also gradually diminished, if you like. From Delhi and living in Delhi with the IAS, I went to Tilonia and lived much, much more simply in what is now known as the Barefoot College. But when I went to Devdungri, we lived in a village mud hut. And I wish you had a photograph of it to show everybody. And in that village mud hut, we lived like people around us. And it enabled us to communicate, made us communicate with them as equals. We understood the problems of the rain, because our roofs leaked with their roofs. There was no question of seeing them from outside and feeling sorry. You knew you were sorry for yourself as well. So the barriers all went. So that is the trajectory that happened. And then I'm now Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, the School for Democracy, and many other institutions that have come up now along that are working. And I'm now, fortunately or unfortunately, pushed into writing, and that book, Personal is Political, is a slogan from the feminist movement. Because our personal is our political. We fight, struggle for equality, for equal access to education, equal access to milk, food, all the privileges that are there at home. And they're all political issues. So Personal is Political grew from that extraordinary slogan that's caught the imagination of the world. And I see that there are many books all over the world published with the same title. It's not only me. So it's fired the imagination of women all over the world. And it brings together the composite human being. So this book is about the composite human being. I'll just tell you one thing and then I'll stop. In Delhi once, I had traveled many miles. By the way, I'm from South India. I was born in Chennai.
Wow.
And I studied in Kalakshetra. So I went to Kalakshetra for 2 years. So at the time when Rukmani Devi was alive, Atte was alive. So I have that culture also in my blood. So Leela Sampson was dancing, and T.M. Krishna, was also in the audience, was singing. And I rushed from Rajasthan. Whatever it was, my public action, I left it. And I said, I just have to go to this concert. And there I met an IAS officer who used to be a very senior officer, head of a big commission of the government, and I won't tell you what and where. And he said to me, oh, what are you doing here? So I said to him, when I'm not standing on the streets and asking for food and shelter, I also listen to music. And like you have come from your heavy responsibilities and burdens to listen to music, so have I. So there are lots of factors which bind us together, which give us a common reality. So in a sense, this book is also about those common realities. What do we share? What do I see? For instance, today I stood on the shores of Neelankare to look at the sea. And that sea is for everybody, for the fisher folk, for the people who are there, for all of us who went to see the sunrise. I mean, so something like that must be realized for democracy to work. You cannot think of it only in its isolated parts. You have to think of it holistically.
So, Aruna, I'm going to stick with the personal arc a little bit before coming to, as I said, the big public battles that you have fought for all of us. Just give me a moment.
I'm so sorry, this bottle is really difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
In rural India, we have lotas, which are so easy to use, or chombus, as you say in Tamil. Just open and you can just drink it. All this modern paraphernalia is rather complicated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I wanted to stay with the personal, and I'll tell you why. Because over the years, when you first went, this was a generation that was celebrated and lauded, and there was respect, a lot of hardship, but respect for the work that you were doing. And somehow the needle has shifted now to where activism and mainstream media is often deemed a bad word. To be an activist is equivalent to being an urban nationalist or an anti-national. By and large, there's an impatience with activism. People deny that, okay, I'm not an activist, that's how you begin by talking about a value system. So I want to track a little bit of why that happened and how do we retrieve the respect. But before that, we have to know what was the personal journey, So if you were to reflect, again, to the distillate of all these years, Aruna, how did this experience change you as a person, and what was the most hard aspect of it?
Actually, activism it's not a nucleus which stands somewhere alone. And I'm really speaking to you as fellow travelers in India and on the earth. All of us feel things. We feel bad when something terrible happens. We feel there should be more justice. We feel that there should be no corruption. We feel that poor child who's on the street needs to go to school. You feel the hospitals should be better. And I challenge, if there's anybody in this audience who doesn't feel that. Is there anyone who doesn't feel that? You all do. The activist does only one thing, which perhaps you don't do, and that is act on it. So it's a universal feeling. It's a universal feeling. The activist only chooses to act. And since in India, to act for justice is so difficult, and I'm again sure that you will not challenge me on that. Just go and pay your rent, go pay your tax, do anything that you do normally, complain against the brutality of a police or constable on the road, do anything, it is difficult. So activism is not easy. So when we struggle, that's why we call people who struggle not to annihilate anybody, but struggle so that life is a better place, that the world is a better place for the many. And in that, we appear, as we often do, strident. Because when you are standing there are people dying all around you, you will be strident. As anybody in this room will be strident if such tragedies hit us. We tend to see only personal tragedies. The social activist tends to see social tragedies. And we are amplifiers of the voice of the poor. All those people who have been named and as anti-national or seditious, 99% of them are just people who have amplified the voices of the poor, which do not reach the ears of the powerful. All that we do is speak truth to power. All that we do is speak truth to power, to try and make truth powerful and power truthful. If that is an offense, then what can we do?
So, there are two questions I'm going to ask you, and we'll answer it's related to what you're saying. That is it, one is maybe there's a disagreement about the pathway, so a little bit, say, from my earlier years as a journalist, when it was also much more adversarial, I now try and understand why do people think the way they do. It's not just enough to disagree, but why. So sometimes when you listen and you talk to people, many people, say in government or in the corporate world, in the entrepreneurial world, they almost see activism, maybe the goal is similar, they also feel they want to serve the country, but that the path is divergent, and they feel activism is a kind of impediment actually to providing development for all, So I want your reflection on that. But before that, I want you to still talk a little more about the personal. Aruna, you spoke about the difficulty of doing public good, but there's also a lot of personal adversity to be on the field like this, and I don't want to gloss over it, so that one understands what commitment it takes, and I'm again connecting it with the earlier session when they said you have to feel a connection to be able to overcome the difficulty of doing something. So you said you lived in a mud hut, with leakage, you were drawing no salary or equivalent only to to the minimum wage that a laborer could earn. What was that life like? And was there any time when you were fatigued and you wanted to just get back to the good life? Did you have moments of doubt? Do share that with us.
I'm going to shock all of you, but I had a lovely life. I think as I kept becoming smaller and smaller, my life had fewer and fewer contradictions. So when what you think and what you do are not that dissimilar, there is so much peace. A friend of mine in the IAS, I keep meeting all my IAS friends. I don't know if there's any in this audience from my batch, but I keep meeting them. And we had a get-together, and we met as a group, and they said, oh, poor Aruna, she lives so badly, and she's got no savings, she's not this thing, that thing, and so on, economically so backward. And a batchmate of mine said, and I think he's so truthful in what he said. He said, we chaps have given up moral comfort for physical comfort.
That's beautiful.
Aruna has given up physical comfort for moral comfort. Now, it's a choice you make. And that choice gives you happiness. Every day, if you're not wondering, oh, did I sign away someone's land? Did I sign away someone's life? Because your subordinates are not to be trusted all the time. Very often they are, very often they are not, and there are too many files to be disposed, and you're signing them and signing them. Then are you doing the right thing? And that's the question that you carry home with you. I still carry it home with me, but in a very muted way. But when I was working in the civil service, then I really carried it home with me in Delhi. How many people had been harmed by a decision that I took? I never knew. So in a sense, there was more comfort, but of course, there are those moments when you have snakes and scorpions and, these little creepy crawlies, and you wish them away. You can't say that you don't have physical discomfort. Of course you have physical discomfort. But then, as my friend in the IAS said, you have to wait, because there's no life without discomfort, quite frankly. I've lived a fair number of years, and I know that there's always one discomfort or the other to deal with every single day.
So, Aruna, how did these years change you? What were the biggest lessons that you drew? You went there, and you've written about that beautifully in the book, actually, that the learning became very two-way. So even even when you were teaching the women their rights, but the afternoon, then they taught you the ways of the village. So again, if you were to look at whether your psyche, your value system, in what ways did it clarify things for you, and how did you change as a person?
There's one thing as a woman I fundamentally understand, and that's where I challenge the males, that we believe that friendships, love and affection are very critical between people and human beings. And all the relationships I've had with the hundreds of women I've met in the villages has been firmed up with a great deal of affection. And after that, there have been huge differences. It's not as if life is wonderful. Northi, who was shown in one of these photographs, I call her my guru. She's a Dalit woman who taught me my village politics. She taught me the predicament of the labor. She also taught me how to get out of that predicament. Because with her work, a case was registered in the Supreme Court as a PIL. She won the case, but not in her name. But she won the case because she refused to have her name on the case. It's a landmark judgment called Sanjit Roy versus the government of Rajasthan. It's a landmark judgment. You can check it up on your All India register. You can go to your Google and find out. But the work was Northeast. So I learned from her how to mobilize, how to talk to people about this important things in life. And we differ. To date, we differ. There are things on which she believes which I don't believe. But that doesn't make a difference. Like if we meet, we'll have differences. But those differences shouldn't make us enemies. Democracy teaches us that it's dissent and difference that builds a healthy democracy. And Northi did it casually. She didn't do it with a lot of verbiage that I'm doing, but she just did it casually and did it with so much assurance and affection. So you learn as you go along that there are differences. There will continue to be differences between Northi and I. If you talk about intercommunity...
Give us an example, just to understand the spectrum. What do you and she deeply disagree about?
The latest is our disagreement is about intercommunity and intercaste marriages. She says, oh yes, it will be all fantastic in principle, but I can't have an intercaste marriage in my family. And she's a Dalit, huh? It's not as if she's a Brahmin who says that she can't. And also she tells me, you know, all these people, all of you who say there's no caste, it doesn't impact you every day. But for those of us who suffer the stigma of caste every day, it's there. It's there to stay. But today, I can't get my child or my granddaughter married out of the community because that's my only security and I have to fight for that security. I may intellectually agree with you, but it's not a physical possibility. But I tell her that if you don't try, who's going to try? You're such a powerful woman. She works the computer. She's, won't believe it, huh? She's been to China, she's been to Germany, she went to the United Nations to release a biannual report on women. She's fantastic. She spoke in front of Ban Ki-moon, she talked and addressed the women in China at Beijing with the Women's Conclave. I stand her up now here, she'd give you a very comprehensive lesson on anything. Then I said, why do you have to believe in these things? She said, well, these are things which happen very slowly.
Right. But so just sticking with the wonderful women you've met there, that again, I found it very interesting that on the idea of sexual identity and gender politics and just the woman's body, you were the timid one, and it's again the village women of Rajasthan, or at least one of the four that you talk of as your band of mentors and friends, that actually opened up the discussion on sexuality. So do share that with the audience, you know, and how did that happen? And what does that say about women in rural India?
See, there's a divide. I mean, there are many divides. What now they call fashionably intersectionality. Because it's a word. But we knew intersectionality long ago, but we didn't know the word intersectionality. Because if you're Dalit, you're also a woman, you're also a widow. If you're a widow, then you also have sexual oppression, you also have financial oppression, you have economic oppression. So all these things intersect. So one of my friends, Bila, you know, she used to always have body jokes, and I used to feel really embarrassed. And I used to say, now that's enough, Bila, you don't have to tell me anymore. Then there was a fantastic book called Our Bodies, Ourselves, brought out by the Boston Collective in the 60s, which really was a revolutionary book for middle-class women, because it talked about our bodies in a manner in which women never, ever talked about it before. I happened to have a copy of that book, and I took it to a training program with women, and I was very worried that they might have very strong reactions to that. They opened the book, and they were completely unfazed by it. They said, oh, so what? We know all this. You don't. You better get educated. But we know everything. And the kinds of things they say and they talk about, completely frank, open, and without any parda, nothing at all. So I've realized that in some ways they have taught us. And there's another, Mangi, a friend of mine, a bunch of professors came and said, oh, you women should not do this, and you should not do that. You should not get your children married young. You should not do that. You should not. She listened to all of that. And then Mangi said to them in her local language, she said, you know, you've studied up to the 16th class. I have barely studied up to the 2nd class. So, okay, I'm a villager and I'm untrained and I don't know anything. But she said, well, I agree, we shouldn't get children married before they are 18, but we are compelled to marry them because one child gets married, everyone gets married. The whole lot are married, but they're not sent to their in-laws till later. But you studied till the 14th class. How many of you have not given dowry or taken dowry? You know there's a Dowry Act. Pin drop silence. Because everybody had either given or taken a dowry. So this kind of inequality has been rubbed out of my mind. Because when I go there, I think to myself, what is it that I'm not doing right? And what is it that Northeast is not doing right or Bila is not doing right? We have to see.
So, Aruna, I wanted you to address that question which I asked, and you were talking about how do you arrive at a place where disagreement is not enmity, So now, if you put the shoe on your foot, there's also a lot of scorn that the activist or the left of center world has for those who drive a certain idea of development, say the direct transfer or any of the schemes of the government which is sort of development driven. So there's this big chasm, and as I said, both sides feel that they're doing something good for the country. What would you say to that, about this divergent paths, and how do we reconcile that? What's the middle point?
I don't know, because in the last 24 years of India's democracy, there has been the evolution of a platform for discussion and debate. Initially, during the early years of this particular millennium, there was this attempt by government to set up a space which was called the National Advisory Council, where people were asked to come and state their positions. As a result of it, some rights-based laws were passed. The Right to Information Law, for which my organization, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, and I are well known now for the Right to Information Law, which we battled for 11 years on the streets. So anyone passing us by must have been really annoyed, they're stopping the traffic, they're doing this, they're doing that. But we made it great fun. For one thing, all our struggles have been great fun. And we even used the Ramdhun, the Raghupati Raghava Rajaram, to make demands. Used to say, Raghupati Raghava Rajaram, Sarkar ko buddhi de Bhagwan. So, PM ko akkal de Bhagwan, CM ko buddhi de Bhagwan, Raghupati Raghava Rajaram. So we turned everything round, and we had a chariot of scams, and we had, people mocking the political system, but in a way in which we didn't defile them or abuse them, but bring out what was wrong with the system. So there was always space for dialogue and engagement. What we now believe is that there should be space for engagement. No unit in this democracy can take its own independent decision. We look at Parliament. Parliament is not discussing issues. It's your concern and mine. It's not just my concern. There is a select committee, there's a standing committee. All these issues should go before the parliamentary committees, which is not one political party, but all people in Parliament. These are issues that we pick up and take up, and they are genuine issues. But in terms of even dealing with issues of finance and money, we should have platforms where we can sit down and talk without wanting to kill each other. Now, the government at this point is responsible for making these platforms because we are not doing it ourselves. And do they make them is the one big question mark. But just at the end of it all, just about a year ago, we enacted in Rajasthan something called the Gig Workers Act. And the architect of all the architects, Nikhil, is also here in the audience. And we decided that we are going to not continuously say, you've done this to the workers, you've done this to the workers, you've reduced ourselves to this, the workers, all the labor laws have been changed in this country. Let's see what we can do with the present system. All of you get whatever it is to your doorstep. Not only Amazon, but there are Denzo, what is it? Zwigo, what is it? Zwiggy. Swiggy and all of them to your doorstep. That fellow who works for that has no guarantees. Falls ill, he goes home. There's no health insurance. There's nothing. There is no guarantee that if he's run over, that if there's a bus, there's Uber or Ola, that it has an accident, that that driver will be taken care of at all. In fact, he gets another debt. So we took a leaf out of a fantastic pattern done by one very famous person in Maharashtra called Baba Adhav. I don't know how many of you know about him. He set up something called the Mathadi Board, in which he made government, the labor, and the employer part of a tripartite. So in the new law, you have the aggregator, who is the person who runs the website, that's all. And they do nothing more than that. The aggregator, but takes all the profit. The aggregator, the worker, and the government, and the tripartite law for instance, in Uber, for every ride that you take, a small amount of money of that ride will be put aside by the aggregator for the money he takes from this person, and there will be something from the government to look after the health and the health insurance for the driver and something for pension. Is this too much to ask? No? So this is the kind of engagement that we want. But now in Karnataka, Karnataka government also wanted to enact the same law, but the aggregators have all, grouped themselves into a negative attitude. Then you will tell me I am negative because I say that the law should be passed and we should struggle against it. But these positions of inhumanity must be got rid of. That's why this book is so important for me, because I feel that first and foremost, we must all identify as humans. If we identify as humans, the human condition is the same, no matter what the color of the skin, the size of your body, the shape of your body, color, whether it's race or color within the country or gender. We must think of that humanity, and we must think of the environment and what we are all collectively doing to it, because it's not, you've had tsunamis in Tamil Nadu. You know what happens when the environment is misused and tampered with. So if at that level we all identify and come together as one unit, agree to disagree, it's not that difficult, My husband and I have disagreed on so many things, and I'm still married to him. It is not necessary to agree or disagree on everything. I mean, you have some basic principles on which you agree, and that's why the Constitution is so important. You agree with the basic norms of the Constitution, we will be bound together. But for the rest, let's have differences and let's talk about them.
So Aruna, just if you deepen this just one more degree, that you said that there's a kind of language breakdown, and you have to reinvigorate the language of activism or to how to get people's imagination. So again, a double-edged question there. Do you think there have been any mistakes with the civil rights movements or with, rights movements in general? Why did people's allegiance or imagination move away from it? Is there any sort of introspection that you think needs to happen? And what did you mean by when you said the new generation's not listening, is not sort of animated by this? And how would you sort of change the language of activism?
Did I say that they were not animated?
I was reading that in some interviews that you've given elsewhere.
No. I think there is, first of all, the fault never lies in one sphere, The picture of an activist, when I was young and left the IAS, I don't know, in Hindi they used to say, "Aap itna tyag karke aaye hain," Tyag. I used to say, "Nahi, there is no tyag." They almost made me into some kind of a later day saint, because I'd left the IAS. And I said, no, this is nothing of the sort. I've done it for my own sake, for my ethics, for my morality, that I've left the IAS. I'm no saint. So from being a saint, now I am an Andolan Jivi, which is a parasite which feeds on just struggle. This big curve did not happen with just one group. It happened because of the ability of the media, and the social media in particular, and power in general, to make us look as if we were anti-national so that we could be got rid of. And there is no opposition to anything. There's a general trend in politics that you don't want any opposition, whether from the US to here. So that's their fault. Our fault is that we have not sat down to find out why we appear self-righteous when we are not. We appear self-righteous when we are not. And why is our logic not ever understood? Because there is a logic. Why is that logic never understood? And what is wrong with the tools that we have used? Is there anything wrong with those tools? These are questions we have to ask ourselves, and we are asking ourselves what they are. And that's why I think there are some points of unity where we come together which are critically important, and those should be nurtured. And we all come together. That's why I'm here today with you. Yeah. Because I feel I should talk to all of you. I'm no witch or, what they call in Rajasthani a dakan. I'm a normal woman. Like the lady who was here before, I'm also elderly and I have the same problems with my knees, and I feel fitness is an important thing, of course. And I'm here speaking to you all in English, which is a common language between us. And if you read the book, you'll find out that I read literature and I listen to, of course, as I said, I listen to classical music. I also listen to Western classical music, which is very elitist. Of course I do. But they then call me elitist if you found me in a symphony concert.
But Aruna, I just want to, for a moment, drop the whatever neutral garb I'm supposed to wear, to say that it's absolutely tragic that, people like you, Sudha Bhardwaj, others who have spent years and years, and that's why I was trying to bring out also you said it was easy and it's something that you enjoyed doing, but it is difficult to move away from creature comforts. But it's tragic that one should have to sit now and literally explain yourself away of why activism or a life in service of the people is something that should not be scorned and should not be despised. And I'm just wondering how that huge gap has come up, because as you said, none of us here sitting would say that people should not get their rights, or that there should not be an egalitarian platform. I'm not saying we need an equal society, but an equal opportunity society, and that why should those who are defenders of that be people who now have to literally explain themselves as not being evil, or not being... What happened? Why is it like that?
No, I think that both parties have to explain themselves. We have no platform for dialogue. We don't dialogue anymore. We don't talk to each other anymore. We have to speak. Even this dichotomy between religions, all will go. Even if you get the priests and the Maulvis and the padres to sit together and talk, as happened in Kanyakumari when I came here 8 months ago for a workshop. We had them all sitting together on stage and talking sense. And each one was a religious person, believed in his, because they were all, unfortunately, they all believed in his faith. But it doesn't mean that we are enemies or trying to destroy each other. The thing that has been lost, and that's why I think dissent, disagreement are important things that we should fight for. The power to articulate and freedom of expression is important, because without that there can be no peace. And there must be respect. Respect that the other individual is not there to finish you off, not there to kill you, but has a different point of view. And you may not agree with the point of view.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Aruna. I genuinely think that that's that one ingredient, that respect actually would diffuse a lot of conflict. So I think you're right, both sides have got so trapped into name calling, which is such a sort of soft and clumsy way of having a disagreement. It's name calling rather than marshalling arguments against each other. And I noticed that even and I'm now speaking, identifying as someone who's more left of center, I would say, but interested in even those in government, those who talk about development. I'm very interested in what is their vision, what do they want to deliver. And it struck me that at your book launch in Delhi, somebody in the panel laughed and said, I'm forgetting what the exact phrase was, but I wanted to take it up with you, that someone said, there are those who want to bring development to India. And the audience started to laugh, So this word development has become very contentious. So could you talk about it from, if you were talking to someone who you're opposed to, what is their idea of development, what's yours? I know in 2 minutes.
In 2 minutes, it's impossible. So I think I will abstain. But let me just say that we must talk. I won't do the, I mean, you're doing a reporter's trick on me.
I am.
Giving me 2 minutes to condense what is a very, very complex issue. And I won't fall into the trap. But I'll just say that you must talk. First, create that platform. Create that sense of equality and give dignity to all people. And then you will be able to talk. And if we don't give that, development, I mean, even we are called development walas. I mean, we are called, all of us got labels stuck on us. So let's remove the labels and let's look at the hard facts. Let's look at what's going to happen. Let's look at the environment. Let's look at resources. Let's look at debt. Let's look at just basic nutrition. Yeah. And unemployment is huge. Huge. For one post of a peon in UP, hundreds, I think thousands of people applied, including PhDs. So now, if this is the condition of rural India, and there is very, very high unemployment, it's going to be very, very difficult for this country to pull on. And in fact, if you look at the numbers of people, and now agriculture is also on the wane. It was our biggest employer after these 3 farming laws came, and also because of the way younger people now want to move away from agriculture. What are you going to give our young people? You have to give them some employment. And the state has a role, and the state must understand that it has a role and define what it is.
Thank you very much, Aruna.
Just a last request. Yes. In this coming together that you talked about, how many of you think that the RTI was a good thing for this country? You all think so. So now the municipality of Biawar, the city where the original struggle began, which is now become a district. So when they became a district, the first thing they said was, we are very proud of the fact that the city of Biawar, which has now become district of Biawar, has given RTI to India. We have given it to India. And there was a plaque that you showed just as one of the slides. They put it up in the central marketplace. And this municipality is BJP. It's the main party in power, and Congress. And we oppose the BJP politically on many issues. But that municipality unanimously said that there must be a right to information museum set up by this district. And it's going to be the first in the world. Now, when that happens, you touch upon some core values in individuals which go beyond party lines, which go beyond your limited ambitions, and you see the country as a whole, and you see something that benefits everybody. And if you are pious, then you will say, Punya ka kaam hai in Hindi. And if you think you're a rights-based individual, you'll say it's a fundamental right. It's a right that's the fundamental right, the most fundamental of most fundamental rights in the Constitution. If you're suffering, you will say, it gives me the right to question. It's changed the culture of India from a quiescent culture to a questioning culture. It has also acted in distributing and redistributing power. It's made us talk power, to talk strength to power, question power. Now, if that is not a unifying factor, what is? And we are RTI activists. Now, when you see me as an RTI activist, you will have one point of view. When you see me as something else, you have another point of view. But it's the same individual.
And thank you so much, Aruna. We could keep talking because there's so many issues. You know, the nature of the state. I would have loved to talk with you about that. But particularly, and I'm so glad you focused on the right to information, because we're living in a time where governments across the board, certainly the central government, but every state government has been trying to dilute the right to information. And we're all sitting by quiescently watching that happen. So even the space to protest is now one of convenience. And no longer Jantar Mantar, go to Ram Leela grounds, move away, don't disturb traffic. But unless we are inconvenienced, and as you said, like discomfort, how do you draw attention to other people's problems? So, I just want to salute you, because I think the fact that so many people bear discomfort on our behalf is a huge thing, and it keeps us all safe. So a big salute to you. And the Narega, there's so much resistance to it, and there are economic arguments against it. But like you said, come down to the basics, that do fellow citizens deserve that basic wages of life or not? And so many of you have fought to create that. So thank you very much for the book, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aruna.